Sometimes when we begin to question our faith or have doubts about our tradition, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert. When we take a step back and honestly evaluate organized religion in the 21st century, many times it doesn't make any sense. The more we cling to it and try to save it, the worse it becomes. In addition, widespread abuse, cover-ups, and victim shaming cause some of us to question whether it will ever be right again.
The Desert Sanctuary was created by Carl and Laura Forehand. It consists of a podcast, a blog, along with Carl and Laura's writing.
We're happy you're here. Welcome to the show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm here with Carl Forehand. I'm Laura Forehand. We are grateful to be with you guys again today. We have a very, very special guest that we will be talking to today. Before we do that, before I read her bio, Carl, what do you want to share with us about maybe the book? Because it's been a while now. It's been out for about a month.
The baby is graduating. It's not a new release anymore. It's been kind of top 5 in new releases in ecclesiology for about a month. So it's real exciting. Yesterday it went back up to 12 overall in that category. So it's doing so much better than we could have expected.
Yeah.
I think people are resonating with it. That's kind of my story too. Mm-hmm. It helps to have some words to it. So
right.
I'm glad we finally released it and let other people have it and to wrestle around with it. And so it's doing well, but we'd appreciate reviews and all those kind of things. Still need feedback and just confirmation that it's helping other people. And kind of along those lines, we're working on starting something that's still in the baby stages called Oasis, the Oasis Network for pastors and spouses of pastors and like
worship leaders
and things like that are deconstructing, that have stepped out, that are kind of out here in the desert, as we call it. So if that sounds interesting to you, the best thing right now would be just to contact Laura or I. There is a place, but I don't want to broadcast it real widely. Right now, it's just kind of in the beginning. So get a hold of us and share all those, share the things like the book and this podcast with other people. I think. Right. Yeah. So we're on iTunes, but iTunes doesn't work very well for our podcast. No surprise, right? You can't share our podcast on Facebook very well if you just use the root, source of it, but you can share the podcast once it's on Spotify. So we continue our streak, even though we're over 200 episodes of being weird and not quite working exactly right. That's the news for the day, I think. Right?
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, that sounds good. That sounds really good. Well, I'm ready to kind of dive in. We have this guest of ours today for many years. Actually, it was back in our very first church, wasn't it? Yeah. So today we're going to be talking with
probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
20 years. Okay. So we're going to be talking to Kathy Weber Jacobitz, and Kathy is a mom of many. She's a high school teacher, former social worker, a homeschooling mom, marriage and church dropout, an ex-evangelical, and alcoholic in recovery in equal parts, a connoisseur of history, theology, and useless trivia, fueled by a deep desire to validate the voices and experiences of people who habitually have been ignored or marginalized in the church, which I love that already. A fighter of the patriarch, she once subsidized, I'm trying to read big words here, Reconstructionist, mental health advocate, a faith forged in doubt, bibliophile. So lots of things, many things.
Yeah.
Kathy, welcome so much to the podcast. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
I knew you when you were like I don't know. Did we meet you when you were a teen?
College, probably.
Basically, teen bride. Yes. No. I was 21.
Okay.
Which
So
is
college.
basically a teen bride.
And
But it's like old in evangelical world. I was like, I was
That's
ready to
the
be
time,
set out to pasture. Yeah.
so what I want to say about Kathy before we get started is I have a lot of respect for you. Think of you as kind of an old soul kind of wisdom person. I've always thought that, and the things you share and the things you fight for online and things like that are always meaty. The things you say. You don't spend 6 hours a day on Facebook for some obvious reasons, but what you say is always like solid gold.
Right.
I think my daughter's same way about you.
Yeah.
And so on. So we're excited to finally hear your story. You've been through a lot.
A little bit.
Yeah. And we anyway, so we want to hear your story, and just I kind of told you before, and we didn't give you a lot of advance warning, but just start wherever you want to in your story, and tell us what you want to tell us about your story, and we'll work from there.
Okay. Well, I am not a linear thinker, so I will attempt to do that, and hopefully not go on too many rabbit trails. But so I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. My parents came from two vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds, polar opposites. So I kind of grew up understanding, not fully understanding, but being exposed to both kinds of worlds. My mother had a deeply religious upbringing. She was the youngest of 8 children. Some of her siblings sang for Back to the Bible. But they were completely a dysfunctional family. And as they would admit. But my grandma had a deep, genuine faith. I always, looking back, I see it was sometimes misguided. But, I fight my cynicism sometimes with remembering her being the hands and feet. So, yes, my father did not grow up with a religious background. I mean, they were like, like my grandfather was an immigrant. He was part of the Germans from Russia community in Lincoln, at the Bottoms. He was my grandpa was just not a nice guy. But, he was business savvy, money savvy. And so that's how they, gained the socioeconomic status they did. So my father became a believer. What I understand now, struggled with mental health issues. But after college, he decided to join the military because I feel, from pieces, that generation doesn't always share. But from pieces I've gathered, he, needed some direction after he graduated college. And so he told me, there was this guy with his Bible that was in his, I don't know if they call him unit in the Air Force, whatever they call him. He was in the Air Force. So forgive me, military purist. But, and so he would make fun of, but my dad said he was just drawn to him because he was so committed. And so, long story short, my father said he entered into the Christian faith because of this guy. So my father became he's a very intelligent guy. So he also, then he went and he got a degree from, I believe, Texas University in Greek, because he wanted to understand. I mean, that explains a lot of my weirdness right there. But so he could understand. So he just studied and he studied because, my father and I are wired very similarly analytically, and it takes those kind of things for often matters of faith to click. They're not mutually exclusive, and so he wanted to find. So my parents married. They have a little bit of an age gap, but my mom grew up, very basically, just rule oriented, but you just sing really good hymns, kind of faith, So I have a younger brother. And my mom, again, is the youngest of 8. My dad had not a nurturing childhood. And once you become a parent, I feel like you give a lot more grace to your parents.
Right.
And I just don't think that they cared. They just didn't have all the faculties, I think.
Right.
To parent. And so a lot of the first years of my life, I was raised by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who then consequently developed Alzheimer's, and then lived with us. So once she became incapacitated, I kind of became the quasi caretaker, not necessarily of her, but of my mother and my brother, and kind of a pseudo spouse in terms of emotional connection to with my dad. So I had a upside down relationship kind of with so my dad chose a church based on what he believed was solid doctrine. And he also thought that they sang too many songs. So we showed up after worship late every Sunday. I sometimes wonder if my dad's on the spectrum, not even on the spectrum somehow, because he just was he just locks into certain things. And it's just this is what, so that's what we did. Consequently, we had maybe 2 healing conversations about this church, but it was it wasn't a cult, but it was a fundamentalist petri dish of just bizarre fringe rules. And so my dad was committed to the church. My mom really didn't my mom liked the down home, him, and this was not that church. So she wasn't as vested as my dad was. My dad led groups like Awana. So we were solid and, and I remember I spent all these hours on this amazing Greek mythology project for school in 6th grade. But again, that shows my weirdness. But, and he was I wanted so badly to have the approval of my father. And he was I showed him this project and he was I wish you knew your Bible verses the way you knew these Greek gods, and I was oh my gosh. So I knew that was a way to please my father. Okay, check. So, there were a number of strikes against us at this church. One, we were not homeschooled, and my mom did not stay home with us. So, the small brain, makes up, reasons for, somehow, not fitting in as well. And it was an extremely affluent church. There was not, we heard nothing of helping people. And so, where my mom worked in, she did the bookkeeping for in-home healthcare for the elderly. And it was a division of United Way. My grandmother was one of those meal senders. And so it was this cognitive dissonance where is that not a part of what so it felt separate. Here's my mom's job that goes and, does in-home healthcare for those on assistance who are those in between. And I found her her supervisor was this older lady who had lost two husbands, went back after she became a single mom after the death of her first husband, got her undergrad, went and got her master's. And she said something to me one time that, and it's just amazing how people like just speak things into your life when you're, struggling with compartmentalization of like, where church and life intersect. And she said, the most important part of my job is giving everybody dignity. And that as a young child, like stuck with me. And I struggled to see like, why wasn't that happening within the fundamental, like why were people who were marginalized not treated with dignity the way, my mother's supervisor who, I think she was a part of a church, but it wasn't like, I went to a church where it's like, well, it was very much proclaimed outrightly, not even covertly, that you attend any other church, it's wrong. So it was kind of like one of those other, churches. So I just began struggling, obviously. I mean, that's kind of duh. I mean, same song, different verse. And I fit in better at my public school, they were accepting, they loved me, and they didn't care that like I dropped the S word once. I remember in 6th grade, I was like, all year, I'm not going to cuss, like making those like, because I just wanted to do it so badly. Well, I like knowing me, I blew it like, I don't remember when, but probably shortly after. And I just was like, I can't do it. I mean, that was the message to me at a young age is like, I can't do being a Christian, but I couldn't say that out loud. Right. I still had to like be on board, carry the flag. But I knew like the decisions I would quietly make would be like, I can't, there are certain type of people that can do it. I'm just not one of them. So that carried me through, high school, and just, I made, soul crushing decisions, based on shame of, this, idea of, we're sold that we're so depraved. And then on top of it, I can't do anything to not be depraved. Right. So I'm screwed. Right. So it's like, let's just, go for it. But, keep on the same, I was an athlete. I don't know. I didn't, things came easy. So I didn't try my best in high school. But I also recognized that I was struggling with mental health issues that were never addressed. And that was something, again, within the church, it's like weak people struggle with those things. That was the overall message. And I remember even my dad saying, that he used to take medication for there was never a diagnosis for anything. And my mom said, Christians shouldn't take medication. So he stopped. And I'm like, for like a really intelligent man, like the shame message was so pervasive that it like completely trumped any logic. And he stopped, like, rather than saying this, actually, you wouldn't tell a diabetic to not take insulin, so I literally, XYZ don't produce this, like, it's not, so there was no, I just saw how logic flew out the window in a lot of areas. And so we stopped going. Well, and another thing that was like my grandmother lived with us. We were struggling caring with her, and like nobody cared. Like nobody asked. Like I was like, my parent, there were so many, like many other people behind the scenes issues. And, but like, we were like struggling caring for, this elderly woman that like forgot how to walk, she forgot how to talk, all these things. And like, no, like, it was just like, we haven't seen you on Sunday. Well, no, like, why?
You can
Why?
cuss on here.
Yeah,
you
you
can
can-
cuss on the Desert Sanctuary.
Well, you know what? I'm trying. Cause like, if you open that floodgate, you might need an NC-17 warning.
Mhm.
But I'm like, well, like, no, like, and so I just became like, screw this.
Yeah.
So just became very, that cognitive dissonance of like where you want it. And, but yet it's like, screw it, if that's what it's going to be. So I was like, I'm, all about school, all about, life and friends and everything that went with that. So, by the time I went to college, did the whole, freshman party thing. And, it just, again, led to a lot of soul crushing decisions. And, I became, depressed, suicidal, eating disorders. I mean, you can say like every after school special you can think of. And, it was just like, I don't, we get, as anybody who contemplates unaliving themselves, like, it's like, you don't want to die. You just want the pain to stop.
Right.
Mhm.
And I like just wanted it to stop because I was so confused. I was so not unnurtured. I was a lone ranger. I always had, peripheral friends, but like, I didn't have like I didn't have those deep connections
Right.
I wanted. But, from the outside looking in, as with most people, it would seem I did, but there was nobody I would never call anybody in tears. That's kind of like how I just don't ever remember doing that. I never did that until I remember one time until I was like in my 20s before I picked up a phone in tears because, with my parents, it was always, I give,
Right.
my needs were a burden, which they wouldn't say, they just didn't have the capacity to deal with them.
Right.
Mhm.
So I remember just being out on this 98th Street Bridge and not, just contemplating wanting to be done, like not fun, and just being like, God, crying out to whatever, because I had studied at Wesleyan, Shinto, I had studied, the Islamic religion. I had studied, not super in depth, but I'm like, I'm open, like, I'm like, I studied all of this because I wanted, at least had a cursory idea of things.
Mhm.
And I'm like 1,000% open, like, just show me. And I just started studying for the first time ever the Bible for myself. And because I, growing up, in Awana, like, I mean, I had the verses on lockdown, like I knew all of them. And so it was just like, but I didn't understand anything. I can remember, I worked for a few months one summer out in San Diego, and they had a theology bookstore at UCSD. And I remember just thinking like, thinking of things like canonization, like who just decides what's in there, like,
Mhm.
and then we just follow it. Like, so we just put this all together, Gutenberg slaps it on a printing press, and like, those are the words. And then we just all literally just shit on each other
Right.
because, and I'm like, that's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
But at the age of 20, I had a conversion experience, to where like there was some clarity in what was being laid out in scriptures. Because, I had so many questions, and you just didn't ask questions within the church. Like,
Mhm.
I just saw a quote this week that said, it's Jamar Tisby, I believe is his name. He said a friend of his who isn't a believer said, like, he asked what their interpretation of or their experience with white Christians are, and it was people who don't ask questions.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like that, and he's like, I knew exactly what they meant. Like, and that was like, yeah, like that's, it wasn't hard, this or that. It's like, they don't ask questions. And I'm like, that's what I felt like. Why? And especially when we crush people who are genuinely like we're not trying to crap on what you believe.
Right.
But it ruins, people's homeostasis so much that they can't engage, because if you rock something of mine, what does that mean for my life? But we don't see people who are asking questions are taking it personal and not seeing that, rightfully so, but are not seeing that necessarily that is their response to their worldview being shaken, and not necessarily because you're not because of you,
Right.
So yeah, so I explained it to my sister-in-law's from Boston, my brother's wife, and we had a conversation about a month ago. Basically just, she did not, Boston's obviously culturally Catholic, and, her family all grew up, like going to the stuff, but, she doesn't align herself with any sort of faith. And so she's like, so what happened? Like, basically, like, where did it go from, being open? And I articulated to her, I said, I think what it was I had no, I didn't have any, like almost like spiritual coping skills. And so I told her, it's almost like that proverb where, a dog returns to his own vomit. I return to what I cognitively grew up with as being able to do it.
Right. Right.
Because I didn't have a community. I didn't have, and I started going to a college group. And I mean, every group has, nothing's perfect, like, even within deconstruction, there's things where people are like, no, it has to be, we even get these absolutes about how stuff is supposed to go down. And it's like, that's the very thing we're getting away from.
Right.
So, but I returned to what I thought was being a Christian, with this almost sense of supernatural ability to do it now. Like, I can do this now. And so I ascribed to all those things that I saw growing up, the rules, the rituals, the legalism, because I wanted to do it right this time. And I think that had I had been surrounded in more, where somebody lovingly just, took me to, okay, it doesn't have, you don't have to go back to that, it would have ended up different. And so consequently, I ascribed to, again, same song, different verse, regular church attendance, morality, doing things right, looking godly. But because I had experienced such grace, legitimately so, I will say I didn't feel the depths of judgment that I felt in the community, because I'd been on, like, quote, the other side. And I was very much aware of the things that I struggled with and what I did. And so I think, that was I don't know, silver lining was that my worst enemy was myself. I couldn't judge anybody harder than I judged myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think that's what I even struggled with, trying to find a Christian community, because I still felt that hint of, we are, somehow the highest evolved form of man. And this bizarre caste system that was securely in place within the Christian community. And so and then I became, not only resolute to do it better, but also depressed because I could see it. You can't unsee it.
Right.
So yeah, got married young, did the whole thing.
Okay, let's pause right there. I want to pause your story for a second. So we're at getting married. So all of this precursor to going into being an adult, quote unquote, we talk a lot about how the people hobble into church. People come to church with a need that many times they're wounded, issues from their family, depression, mental illness. And the hope is that the church will be a sanctuary. It even calls itself a family. And we say to people, you just need to have a family. You just need a father and a mother, and however we define family for you, and then you'll be better. But in all these institutions, you didn't find that. And people would say, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, but ours is different. How do you respond to all of that? And how do you assess all of that? Is there a systemic problem in all of it? Is it just a few that are weird and broken or cult-like?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding.
Or is it, it's a huge systemic problem that's gone on since some white guys, decided what would be in the Bible.
Right.
Is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? And can you reflect on that at all? That's kind of a disjointed question, but I hope it makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I think, first of all, I engage the person who says that. I mean, I think, point blank, our church is different. Okay. Can you tell me? I think it took a long time to get, I think, first of all, we have to do a lot of inner work before we engage that. Glennon Doyle had in her book, I can't even remember the last book.
Untamed.
And I reference this all the time to people because I think it's so powerful in so many capacities. But when they decided to go forward with their relationship, like, she said something that they are on an island and we only let certain people on that island while we make this decision and heal. And I think that when we decide, I think so often we want to convince people right away. And that I'm okay. I still am kind of one of you. I'm just figuring it out, we want to convince people that we haven't done the inner work first. And so if we get on that island and decide who we're going to engage with first, who we're ready to engage with, I think is a big part of it that I wish I would have done. Because I mean, so often we're spilling our sacredness, like you said, before people who one, aren't ready, and two, aren't going to honor it. And so we wound ourselves even more.
Yeah.
Because we haven't necessarily stepped back and done, like Brene Brown says, who's worthy of hearing this story?
Yeah.
So if somebody engages me in that way, first of all, like, are they worthy of hearing it? And can I answer and engage with them in a way that doesn't suck me in personally.
Sure.
Because I can ask them things like, okay, I think open-ended questions are good. Okay, how does your church do that?
Mhm.
Like, how do you feel? It's like, I'm willing and being willing to listen, not just being like, well, show me, okay, like 100%. I'm as a person who's ready to heal, like, sell it to me, and like, I think that takes a lot of pressure off us as like trying to, defend why or why not we might choose something, and be like, okay, then correct me if I'm wrong. Like, you have the floor. So,
Yeah. And even though, a cult like church that firmly believes they have all the answers, that God is on their side, doesn't in any way mean they have the secret to healing. In fact, they probably don't understand it at all.
no. And that's another, sorry, I don't keep, but obviously I'm a nerd and I read a lot, but like, Dallas Willard, and I can't remember, it was in the last book of his that I read. Gosh, and I should have written all these down, but it was huge for me in healing. But he talks a little bit about like the power of pity, and how, like, if we look at people who are still stuck, like, or who are even horrible to us, transforming our, like, and not in a to placate them type of way, but to genuinely say that would be horrible to be like that. Like, and to grieve that, like, has been huge for me, because like, even if people say they have all the answers, I'm like, you don't. And if that's like, I can be like, 5 + 5 is 11. Cool. We got it. And move on, like, it's not my job. There are certain people and certain circumstances where I feel, like, led to engage. And like, if people are going to double down, because I mean, all of us at some point doubled down on something, and like, we did on so many things, and like, they're doubling down right now. And I think a part of understanding grace is even giving people like that grace, like, and taking our woundedness, like, on pause for a minute, and just being like, they're equally as wounded for believing that. So,
Yeah.
So let's continue on with your story. You were just getting married young.
yeah, but
Yes.
Yeah.
That's about the time we met you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I mean, contrary to kind of the evangelical culture, I was not looking to get married. I, poured myself into ministry. I was ministering. I was rescuing. I mean, what would the faith do without me? I felt, but I always did. I felt a passion to, I saw hurting girls the way that I was. And, be who you needed when you were younger was big to me. And so I really was genuinely, and I genuinely believed that if they, followed in a path, they wouldn't have those soul crushing decisions. And so I genuinely believe it. I mean, I believed it at the, that I was keeping kids from horrible things. So it wasn't out of everybody needs to be on my team. It was like, I don't want you guys to learn the lessons I had, what we do. So I poured myself into that. And then, I was very, wounded in any type of relationship type way, and was very leery. I mean, I wasn't a big dater ever. like things would start, I would have and they'd start to get, semi-serious. And I'd be like, I'm out. Like, I just like, I wasn't, one of those, I had to get married and, type people. So I met somebody who was very much marriage oriented and had communicated to me that and I don't mean to chuckle, but that God had told him he was to marry me. And I literally laughed. I mean, even then was like, what? Like, like we need to, like, we're just having coffee. I mean, like, and I was like, listen, like, I even remember saying like, things don't have to be weird, but like, we're just gonna, and I remember him being completely wounded by that I wasn't, looking back, obviously, like completely like, oh my gosh, you didn't just like say yes, like, hindsight's 2020. But I fell into the I'm going to do everything right trap, because I had never done it right, the purity culture, the everything, like I'm doing this right this time. But also I completely abandoned my own, myself, I allowed his timeline to dictate everything.
Sure.
Because I defaulted to what I had grown up knowing rather than seeking out something different. So,
yeah. That's it's sounds like such an absolute statement, but at various times we do that. Key moments in life, we and it's very simple what you said. I abandoned myself.
Yep.
Right. And so you gave up that and became
my own autonomy. Yes.
Yeah.
And when you became a mom of many, as you describe it.
Yes.
A homeschooler.
Yes.
Back to your past, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other. I mean, we could do this all day, but yeah, someday there will be some type of publication with pseudonyms. I don't know. So yes, I mean, following suit. I remember distinctly. As I had no reference of small towns. I mean, the only other place I'd lived and worked was San Diego, and I even prior to engaging in a relationship, I knew he wanted, I knew his, I met his family and I knew his preferences. And so I said, listen, I was, as much as I, wanted to be certain things, I had slowly at that point, which is unfortunate because it dissipated, but was pretty aware of who I was and who I wasn't. And I said, if, the rural, farm wife is what you're looking for, that's great. But I will never be that. And so I just, before there's any type of, relationship or any, and it was communicated, no, it's you, and those are the magic words for somebody who's never had, somebody see them. Because I wanted to lay it all out and be like, are you still in? Are you still in? Are you constantly? It was never like, I'm going to pretend all this and then just do it. I'm going to lay it all out. And although I don't want to push him away, I want to make sure this is not a bait and switch here.
Right.
And so, it was like, no. So, I mean, I was as honest as I could be, at that point, and it was constantly. And so I felt the acceptance, especially of a male that I'd never experienced before, what I thought was, the acceptance. And so I, you combine that with some spiritual bullshit and you're like, I'm in. God has signed, sealed, delivered
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Wonder, I'm yours, you know?
Mhm.
And so, I walked into that as like, this was a divine assignment, unfortunately, and not a partnership.
Mhm.
And that set the stage for not being good. Obviously, it's not a good, you know. And so, yeah, I had no reference for, you know, rural, small town. And so even when he wanted to move back home, I was like, okay, listen, I'll do, like, I even said, like, I'm going to struggle and I'll probably cry a lot. I said, but I'm willing to do this for 2 years. But I still remember, here's what, and I don't know if you, you can always cut this out, but like, I still remember when what bothered me, so what set off not feeling, I don't know what it was. And this was the beginning of me not speaking up, but I remember going back to his grandparents' house and he's like, I want to show you where, and then asking you guys, you know, like here you guys were with your kids and you had young kids and you were living, and then you were going to have to find somewhere else, all because he was just going to try out living there with no direction. And I still remember walking through and not being okay with it and being like, we're asking these people to leave, you know, just because you happen to be born to this man and this, you know, like, but it like was the beginning of like my rights. This is what we do. You know, I show up and I say what I want to do and my family makes it happen. And I was so uncomfortable because I was like, but I felt like it wasn't my position to say, why are you like, are they okay with, you know, do they have time, you know? And it was always like, well, they understood that, well, everybody does that when you rent something, no shit, you know, that they're gonna, but I'm like, you know, this is like, we're just two dumb, you know, like college graduates. We don't have, you know, like this is a person with, you know, so I'm like, I didn't say anything. And man, I like, anyway, to this day, it bothered me. So that's what set off, you know, moving there already. So.
Yeah.
When,
I was thinking back to I honestly like never held any like animosity.
Oh, I know you guys didn't. Oh, I know. Because people treated you like that all the time.
yeah, that's part of the deal.
I was just like, that's just the, you know, tip of the iceberg for stuff that went down. But I'm like, I was like extreme, but you know, everybody was, it's like, I like always look around. I'm like, is everybody okay? That was just the beginning of feeling, like you said, weird and strange and broken and wound, you know, like, is everybody okay with it? Is everybody on board? And I just, that continued. So.
Yeah, it's the thing I remember, like I was probably grateful actually, because the people that owned the house, like I remember them having, you know, and you, like you said, I had 3 small kids and I resonate very much with your story as far as I'd never lived in a small town before. So here I was living in this town of like 200 people and being, you know, a pastor's wife and having little kids and all the crap. And then like the people that own the house that were at a time, you know, related to you, like came over and just told me what a shit job I was doing taking care of their and keeping it clean. And I was just like, what? I bawled after that. And I was just like, I mean, and like you said, that's just one of many like not good enough stories. Like you are not a good enough mom, a good enough wife, a good enough pastor's wife. You can't even take care of, you know, this house that you're renting. And I'm just like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, and
how are you doing? How are you doing?
Right.
Like what's leading to that?
Yeah.
Like,
right?
I'm like, where are these people buying these audacities? Like, can I sign up? Like, I remember even hearing that story. And I'm like, first of all, Like you rent to somebody, like my dad had rentals, and my dad, like for better or worse, like my dad would just go like mow their lawn, and he was just like we literally stayed in our lane. Like
Right.
I'm like, stay in your lane. The audacity of like the stuff that I continued to see, like, I mean, it blew up to like DEFCON 1 when I moved there. Like, are you like who? Yeah, they even said, and then they were like huffy at me because I'm like, dude, like, you don't just go and tell like that, and they're like, well, it's our property. Like,
Yeah.
well, who are you? Like Christopher Columbus? Like,
Right.
like
Yeah.
go away, anyway, but I couldn't but slowly you're made to feel like, again, you're just gaslighted,
Yeah.
But
Yep.
Yes.
100%.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So when we're right and God is on our side, it amplifies it. So I can apply it to anything. Well, I'm the pastor of this church, or I'm the landowner.
1,000%. Yeah.
I'm the father. I'm the head of this family. And so I have the right, in a sense, to abuse you. I have the right to make you do what I want you to do.
Well, I obviously I've analyzed the hell out of this, but it's like I literally am doing it because I'm a good person and you need it, and that is what loving you is. Like, I am loving you by making you like me, because I am like, everybody should want to be like me, like just that mentality of like I'm doing it right. And so by loving you, I'm like telling you what you should do. That's loving you. Like, it is so twisted.
Very twisted.
And it just shows how broken they are. Like, if you think that's what love is, like, oh my God, that means they have never experienced it. And that's what I slowly recognized, is that broken people like do the craziest shit like that because they have no frame of reference, and they feel so justified because they have no frame of reference of love. Like none, like it continues generationally. Like and then they're so butthurt because they're like, I'm loving you though. Like it's like nothing clicked. I'm loving you. Like I'm caring about you and telling you you're doing a shit job. Like, isn't that loving you? Like, are you kidding? And they'll be incredulous about it. Like, you're just not thankful for their love.
Right.
Yeah. So
you made a really good point just then, that they have no frame of reference,
No.
Like, I never thought of it that way. That's a really good point. And I think like I need to learn to think about things in that capacity a little bit more, because I find that once I'm hurt, it's hard for me to show grace, that grace that you're talking about. And not that you're giving them a pass when you kind of, like you said, you analyze it and you're just like, well, the reason they think this is love, or they love this way, is because that's all they've ever known,
Yes.
So that's that's a really good point.
Well, it's almost like it frees us from allowing their junk to affect our lives.
Absolutely.
Because I'm like, I am sorry that you are like this, like, but I'm making a conscious choice not to be like that. And like, I'm not going to let your, like, that version of whatever you think that is affect me. It does, you have to work through it, but at least it brings you back to like it takes you out of that shame, personal, like you still have to identify like that hurt.
Right.
But it hurt because like I wanted them to love me correctly, not because I am something not lovable.
Right.
Yeah.
So Kathy, we haven't even got through half of your bio.
I know, Rhett, sorry.
And like I really want to invite you back to talk about addiction.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
I would love to just sit and talk for a while about that.
That'd be really good.
But you made there's a quote in your bio that kind of harkens back to your younger life, and said that you want to be a person that validates voices. I didn't write it down completely, but it says of people who have been habitually ignored or marginalized by the church. That was the statement you made in your bio. Tell us just maybe kind of, we're starting to wind down here. Yeah. About what that means specifically, why you care about it so much, and how it could, maybe it could help us find a new mission for church or religion or spirituality. How could this maybe be a new path as opposed to what we've been talking about, that old idea of patriarchy, of, I'll love you by correcting you, by getting you to do what we want you to do. Yeah, we definitely need to do part 2 one of these days. But can you just kind of summarize that a little bit? People who have been habitually ignored or marginalized by the church, what does that mean?
I mean, it's just the walking wounded. I mean, point blank. But in terms of addressing it, I mean, I think in systems. So I think, like, when we're addressing any problem, we need to address what system is broken. And if we're still trying to shove wounded people into a broken system, we're just wounding them more.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's not like, I mean, obviously, like, people love to their capacity, so like, it's just like, just come to church, like, just come, and we love, like, okay, but we also need to recognize first that that's not the place right now. Like, hopefully we can envision a time, and I want to be hopeful and not, because I feel like there's a certain season of deconstruction where you become so cynical and like, screw this all.
Right.
And that's okay. I don't, there's no shame in that, but I feel like, there's there should not should, but like, don't should on yourself is my favorite thing. There can be another side to coming on the outside of that, to be like, I want to be hopeful, but I'm not stupid. I want to recognize that this system is, any systemic thing, like, there's zero harm in saying this is kind of shitty right now. Like, we're not blaming people. We're not, it's not one person, in anything, in schools, in equality, in gender, and any, like, we're not like saying you did it.
Right.
Literally, like, you single-handedly. It's just recognizing, listen, I have a hope for the body of Christ someday, but it's broken right now. And you are wounded and you have a tourniquet on, and we literally want to put you into the battlefield of a church that's broken. Like that, it doesn't work. And then we wonder why, like, people go deeper and deeper into, either depression, ideation, or like pure rejection. It's like, you're sending them into something we've all recognized is broken, like, it's, the church is imperfect. The church, like, that's not okay. Then what do we do?
Right.
Like, stop it. Like, stop excusing it.
Right.
So I think that when we see like, I have such a heart for people who are like, I still remember, like, when I quit going on Sunday mornings and like having, like, needing somebody to be like, that's okay if you don't go, just simple things like that. Like, and it sounds so like I'm a toddler pooping my pants, but like, I don't want to go. And my Sunday mornings are nice and they're laid back, and that's okay.
Right.
Because I would watch my, friends who never grew up, like, they grab this Sunday paper, they go walk their, they go to the park, they would heal. And I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, it's as simple as that. like, it's okay to heal, because God loves you more than he loves an institution. Like,
Yeah.
God loves you more than he loves, that was key for me. Even in the ending of my marriage was, God loves you more than he loves marriage.
Mm.
Like, he loves his daughters more than he loves marriage. I'm like, oh, like, seriously?
Ah, that's big.
Yeah.
That's just really big. Like, yeah.
And
So, I mean, yeah, he loves his children more than he loves any institute. Like, the whole crutch of our faith is to literally give anything for people who have gone astray. Literally. Abandoned everything for anybody who's wounded. Like, we've just literally complicated the hell out of it. It's not that complicated. It really isn't. It's really not complicated to give somebody a call or to check in and be like, hey, not necessarily how can I help you, but like, would this bother you if I did this? Because I see you're struggling, like literally understanding how to love people is literally what the faith is, because it's how we get through the shit.
Yeah.
So maybe first loving yourself, figuring that out.
Yeah, we can't give what we don't have.
Love from the inside, and then maybe, like Paul Young says, realizing that an institution can't love you, an organization can't love you, and it's always the organization. We talk a lot about how the organization always comes first, and the needs of the organization comes first, and that can be even inside, of a marriage, and brokenness in a marriage and so on. And so it's very clarifying what you're saying, because, in all the things you've been saying, you've really been kind of amplifying kind of that simple message of, I just need to love. And here's some reasons why people can't love. And they don't understand it, and they don't even know that they don't know.
Right.
No.
So just saying, go to the institution, go to the, just be married, be in a family, or just
pray more.
Be in a family called church, or be in an institution, be in the right organization will solve your problems, and it doesn't.
No.
It amplifies it. Anyway, we've run out of time today, Kathy. We need to do a part 2 for sure, because there's so many
a lot
things
more
we
we want to talk about.
Let's see if I'm like, maybe you should see how it's received.
Or give you a chance to recover from this a little bit. So many more things I want to talk to you about. And we just, as you notice, we just listen for most of it because we're just soaking it in, like always.
I'm a huge introvert. So if anybody gives me like, a chance to get out of my head, like I get nervous because I'm like, I don't know if I might be like committed, if people like actually knew what was in my head. And 2, like, I'm very, very grateful. So
all right, good.
This has been a great conversation.
It has been.
Yeah.
And for the listeners out there, as I mentioned in the beginning, keep buying the book, keep sharing the book, sharing it around. Also, keep sharing
this podcast. There's a lot of healing in this conversation.
Yes, we're kind of committed, not exclusively, to interviewing women for the next few months. We've booked up through November, I think, to hear women's voices and we want to hear that side of the issue. And so keep listening, keep sharing, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary. We hope you find who you are as you embark on your own journey.
For all of us here at the Desert Sanctuary, be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.